My name is Cody Blunt. I am doing a presentation for the University of Texas of the Permian Basin. It is for CRIM 4321501 Probation and Parole with Dusty Gallivan, and I am doing my presentation over drug offenders and community-based corrections. So everything that we're going to go through is about the program, services, and treatments provided. We're going to cover intensive supervision, therapeutic communities and community-based residential facilities, outpatient services, halfway houses, vocational training and employment, and relapse prevention. So with intensive supervision, for these drug offenders, it's typically for those that need closer surveillance. With this closer surveillance, it also employs a smaller caseload on that probation or parole officer. So instead of having a caseload like this, these specialized units are going to have caseloads like this, just so they can have more frequent contact and a more one-on-one approach with these offenders. With that, it also allows for more exposure to treatment. So these probation officers are allowed to give these offenders more treatment. So like if they have a SUD, a substance use disorder, then with this intensive supervision, they can basically force them into some type of close-knit community or counseling or something like that. There's other specific terms. It all depends on the probation or parole officer themselves. So like they could put them on GPS monitoring, they could put them on house arrest. It really all comes down to the offender themselves and what they have done or if they have a risk of reoffending. So Texas itself has something called a super intensive supervision program, and it's basically an intense supervision but just more intense. Their goal is just for the offender not to reoffend. And so the entire goal of this is to protect the community and deter them from doing any other type of criminal behavior. With this, research shows that it comes in 3 phases. Those 3 phases ranging from most strict all the way down to strict to less strict. And if the defendant or not defendant, the offender can successfully complete this intensive supervision, then it can either be temporary or permanent. And now moving into therapeutic communities, this is usually assigned as a condition of probation and parole. The probation or parole officer can decide whether or not these individuals, these offenders of drugs, need to go into a therapeutic community. Typically it's for those that are drug dependent or have a history of drug abuse, so those with SUDs, substance abuse disorders. In these therapeutic communities, they have medical treatment, counseling, and the most important thing is they're in a well-controlled environment. It's usually 24 hours, and for those 24 hours there's always a clinical staff on hand. And these therapeutic communities differ by jurisdiction. Texas itself takes these therapeutic communities very seriously. They provide their own mission statement on the Texas Department of Criminal Justice page, and they say that these programs are to provide evidence based on substance use treatment services appropriate to the needs of individual offenders to facilitate positive change and to provide accountability for programming, utilizing assessment tools developed specifically for this population, all of which leads to reducing recidivism and improving public safety. So the goal here is to reduce them being able or wanting to reoffend or reoffending in general, and to improve public safety. The next thing that usually comes after these therapeutic communities is an outpatient servicing. And so this outpatient servicing could either help them understand criminality and what criminality is, or with people that have SUDs, helps them maintain and conform to sobriety. And that's very important, because if they don't conform, then it's obviously criminal if they do not or if they relapse. These are usually day or evening programs. It's really just dependent on their choice and the probation and parole officer's choice. And like the other two things, they're jurisdictional. It ranges per jurisdiction. But research is indicative of lower recidivism rates for using outpatient services. These outpatient services help the people cope with life stressors or obstacles that may come in their way. And not only that, but develop social and work skills. Halfway houses is the next thing. These are basically like a therapeutic community, but they're like not considered sober houses per se, when actually they require them to be sober. Halfway houses are strict, but they're a caring environment, and they offer a stable environment for these offenders. A stable environment is very important because research shows that these offenders that abuse drugs or were arrested for drugs didn't have a stable environment as a child or throughout young adulthood, adolescence, or late adulthood. It's a step at regaining their liberties. So step by step, they are regaining each liberty. I mean, of course, some of them aren't there, but they're regaining them step by step. They're getting rehabilitated. They learn skills. They get counseled, which is very important. And more importantly, these halfway houses have specific rules, and so these offenders have to conform to those rules. Like drug testing, they have to help do laundry. They have to be in the halfway house at a certain time. And moving into vocational training and employment, which is another service offered. So it helps the offender find a job, and a lot of the time these offenders are stressed with not finding a good paying job because of their criminal history. And so with this vocational training, they're able to gain extra training for finding a better paying job. So they may be able to get extra certs, or may be able to get any type of help they can get to grant them more access to a higher paying job. This vocational training and employment help typically occurs in conjunction with one of the other services provided above. So like at the halfway houses, they may bring in vocational trainers, or the director of the halfway house may help them find employment. But being a drug offender, employers typically look down on that as a criminal history, like schools do. Like you can't get financial aid if you have a drug charge. So, I mean, I worked in a corporation, a big corporation, and corporate personally told us, as me as an operations manager, I was in charge of hiring and firing, that if an applicant come in and they had a drug offense, to automatically discard that applicant. So I'm sure that happens in many other places, which results in these offenders securing a low-paying job instead of like a normal person that could achieve a higher-paying job. Research has been done on this vocational training and employment help, and they found that the offender needs treatment first, and then employment and vocational training second. The reason being is if you give this offender employment and vocational training first, with them being a drug offender, they're going to get money, and that money is going to either be spent on drugs or something that's within the world of a criminal act. And the last thing is relapse prevention. Relapse prevention is what I like to call like an invisible service, when it's really not, because when you have drug offenders and they go through all these services, programs, and treatments, they are given relapse prevention in many different ways, the majority of it being counseling. So it's intertwined with other services, programs, and treatments. Consequences, if relapse happens, they're given consequences, but this ensures the offender knows that the danger they put themselves and society in by using those drugs. And like every other service or program or treatment, it's jurisdictional. It's all up to that jurisdiction to decide whether or not they're going to put them through something like this. Prevention is usually done in the form of counseling, and so these counselors let these drug offenders know that relapse is part of recovery, but it's not a personal failure. And so it's not like they're condoning it, but they're letting them know that, research shows that people are going to relapse, and it's not a personal failure. It's a daily struggle that these people have to go through, and the justice system looks at it as a criminal act because it is a violation of parole or probation. But research also shows that relapse rates are high among these offenders, and that training and prevention has to be provided, and hopefully that's done through these other services and treatments and programs. And so my personal outlook on this is that, of course, improvements, they can be made. I mean, my beard's not perfect. I should probably trim it up, but I'm using that as an example. Nothing is perfect. Everything can't be perfect. So of course there can be improvements made, but I feel like as a nation, we're doing as much as we can. Maybe some states are lacking, or jurisdictions, but that again is jurisdictional. But it's up to that individual, that offender, to take the treatment and the services and the programs serious. They need to have that mindset that they want to change themselves. I've been through this with my family members. My Uncle Sean, I'm going to be brief about it. He's an habitual offender. He is known for stealing, but the reason why he steals is because he's a drug addict. He's addicted to methamphetamines and any other hard substance that he can get his hand on. So in order to buy these, because he didn't necessarily want to get a job, he would steal from people. He's been in and out of prison multiple times. He's been to jail multiple times. You can look up his rap sheet on the Ector County Jail Records page. But he's come through these programs, and he's literally sat there and told us that he didn't relapse while he was there, but as soon as he got out, he wanted to do it again. So I think it's all in the mind. That's my personal opinion. And on the other side of the spectrum, my grandmother, my mother's mom, she was addicted to methamphetamines and was put in prison in the early 90s, I believe. And she made it out of prison. She re-entered society. She went through all these services that we talked about above, or at least some of them. But she had that mindset that I want to change. I want these services to work. I want to be a normal person, a functioning member of society. And she became one and ran a multi-million-dollar company. So that's why I feel, from personal experience, that it's all in the mind. It's all in the mind. This person has to want change. They have to want change. Because all the services above, research shows they're effective. But of course, like anything, improvements can be made. In conclusion, all the services and treatments and programs work around the same goal. The goal is to get that inmate re-entered back into society. Most of these services and programs and treatments are conditions of their parole or probation. So complete step A, step B, step C, and then continue your years of probation, but while maintaining that sobriety, and pass your drug test, keep a job, so on and so forth, and you'll re-enter society and be successful. That's the goal. Reduce recidivism, protect the public, and protect that person. The ones above, all the services and programs and treatments, are just some general services and programs that are provided, and each state, county, or municipality has different criteria or areas that they want that offender to meet, and it all comes down to that county or to that municipality or to that state at what the drug offenders need to complete, and it ultimately comes down to that individual's thoughts or individual's likeliness of reoffending. These are my references. The majority of them come from government websites, government research, and one of them is the book. That is all. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.